Week 9 XFL is here. We've also got USFL starting this week. I don't know if we're going to do any content on that, but that's something to talk about. Could take away from some of the players that are entering in XFL. As far as Week 9 goes, playoff implications, we have some injuries to talk about. I say we just get right into this. Let's do it. What is up, guys? Welcome to the Xfl Dfs. My name is Tyson Smith, joined by Ellie Hernandez. Ellie, I did not do too well with XFL last week. In fact, I got annihilated. I think building, like changing up everything with the McCarran news and trying to get that done in an hour, that screwed me up, and I didn't put enough stock into that final game, man. Like most of the games throughout the weekend were a dud. If you didn't have that game stacked up at the end there, you were probably screwed. How did you do?
I didn't do too well either. I kind of just muted my phone as the night went on and shifted over to watching basketball. Yeah. I ended up just downloading MLB The Show onto Xbox, and that's what I did. I just didn't respond to everyone for a couple hours.
Oh, yeah, I was pissed.
That's how it went for me, man.
Yeah. We did, luckily, we did have some success in the Discord. Looks like one of our YouTube commenters and Discord members, Brother Phil Guitar, took home 5K on the Sunday only slate, I believe. Good job, Brother Phil. That was a nice lineup there. He had Teamu, Patrick, Blake Jackson, Chris Blair, Abram Smith, Juwan Green, and Roughnecks defense. When it comes to the big contest for the weekend, here's the winning lineup. 164.34 points. Jeff Drazik, Ben DiNucci, Jaquez Patrick, Chris Blair, Juwan Green, Blake Jackson, Lucky Jackson, and Renegades defense. Last week I was not into Jaquez Patrick that much. Like the projections and the Sims from Saber Sims, like literally had Jaquez Patrick like in every one of my lineup, and I'm like, dude, that guy, he was terrible last week. Like I just couldn't get over it. I couldn't force myself to play him like as much as the field, and of course he went off. You had a huge game by Chris Blair, and look, Juwan Green at this point, he's got 5 touchdowns on Seattle. He leads the team in receiving touchdowns on that team, so, and in touchdowns in general. So what jumps out to you with this lineup here, man? It's pretty straightforward here. It's stacking a ton from that one game.
Honestly, this is kind of what I was expecting to see a little bit more of this season instead of kind of just the running back lineups. This is more on par with what I expected, right? You got your mid-tier $6,800 Jaquez Patrick, which is a fine play. Obviously, the 23 points is what got him there, but the rest is wide receivers, man. It finally happened. You finally got the win with all the wide receivers in flex, so I was happy to see that. But yeah, man, you had to have that last game. If you didn't have that last game stacked up, you're pretty much out of the water. We talked a little bit about Juwan Green on the show last week, so I can confidently say that is one of the few things we did get right. But he was chalk, so a quarter of the field was right on that one.
He's going to be huge chalk again this week. Not to say that it's a bad play, but he could be 40 plus, 50% owned. And, there's a lot of those wide receivers that could equally have just as good of a game as Juwan Green. I'm not saying don't play him. I'm just saying in tournaments you can get a little bit of leverage there. All right, let's move on to this week, Week 9. I can't believe it. We've already got to Week 9 already. That's pretty awesome. Trying to end this season strong here. Let's look at injuries first. So Raquel Armstead is limited. Some of these teams don't actually give like what if they're questionable or what. They just tell what they were throughout the week practice wise, so that's why you see the question mark. So Armstead and Josh Hammond were limited this week. I don't know what to expect from them. Obviously if Armstead is out, you get a huge boost to Abram Smith and maybe a little De'Aaron King. Maybe De'Aaron King gets mixed in there as a decoy. Josh Hammond, if he's out, big ups to Blair and Lucky Jackson most likely. When it comes to Vegas here, so Badette, with that thigh injury, we saw him go out 2 weeks ago in that first quarter. He missed last week. He is officially listed as questionable, but he was limited all week. He didn't have any DMPs, so that could be a good sign. If Badette plays, man, nobody's going to play him. He's expensive. He's still one of the top wide receivers in the league. And now with McClendon looking pretty confident, maybe Badette is the pay up to be different kind of guy and still get a ton of upside going with a decent matchup. Martavis Bryant, he had neck injury. He was a DNP on Tuesday, Wednesday, but he was a full practice. We could see him play. Sexton questionable. Rod Smith was probable with an illness. We did see John Lovett, pull the Lamar Jackson, and I think he shit his pants or something a couple times, and they had to take him out and bring him back in, take him out, bring him back in. But we saw what's his name, that Burt dude, crush. Pretty much all the running backs for Vegas are viable at this point. They're looking pretty good with McClendon. McClendon being a rushing attack guy. I think all these running backs are viable. Cody Latimer is officially out. That's the biggest news that we need to talk about this week. How does it affect Orlando? Do the backup tight ends get that volume? I don't think so. I mean, Cody Latimer is a bigger wide receiver that kind of plays that role, that tight end role, but he's all over the place on the field. I don't know who would replace him. It's probably going to be like a Dan Williams situation, or you see more with Orlando. These third, fourth options. Who knows who it's going to be from week to week? We'll talk about that a little bit later. Dejoun Lee, shoulder injury, is out, so that could mean a little bit of a boost to Borgie. Or in my opinion, I think Bryson Aline gets the biggest boost here. I don't know that I'm playing him necessarily. They did sign a guy off the street. What was his name, Ellie? You're muted too, by the way. They did sign a guy.
Jeremy Cox. Jeremy
Cox. He's not even on the slate. So really the only thing that matters here is probably some Bryson Aline, get a little bit of exposure to him probably. Michael Bandy. This dude is slowly becoming the guy when it comes to targets on this team. He's been on the team for 2 weeks now. Last week he had 9 targets. Bandy is a guy, I think he's at 3,600. I'm super interested in this week. I think he's sort of replacing the Cedric Byrd role a little bit and doing a little bit of a better job. He's probable. Keep an eye on him, because if he's out, that could affect some of those third, fourth string wide receivers. Let's get into AJ McCarron. Let's get into St. Louis here. So McCarron with that shoulder injury, he was limited Thursday, and now that Tianu was just moved to the IR like yesterday, I believe, it seems to me like McCarron, he just got to play. He has to play this week. This is a huge game, man. If they lose this game, they could be out of the playoff spot. I know they still have a shot the next week, but you got to win this game. There's no way that in hell they're not playing AJ McCarron unless he regressed over this week. But it seems like last week they sat him just as a precaution because they wanted to save him for the playoffs. What jumps out to you here? And I mean, you got to think that AJ McCarron's playing this week, right?
Yeah, man. Look, I don't know how you have anybody come in and fill that role. Nick Tiano, he did a pretty good job. But AJ McCarron's got to be ready to play. Otherwise, I think they would have made some other moves here to try to bring in something more reliable. But look, man, the one thing we need to keep in mind, though, when it comes to all these injuries is we really have no idea what the fuck is going on. We don't know the rules. We don't know what it comes down to. Just even reporting, right? Like I mean, I think you have an entire rant, so I'll let you go off on AJ McCarron here because I love my Bama boys, so I can't do too much about it. But look, we don't know what's going to happen. So even guys like John Trey Kirkland, he's on IR. We don't know if that means that he's not allowed to play. So be mindful of what you're doing when it comes to playing any of these guys, and just don't have 100% AJ McCarron and don't fade him completely until we get that news.
Yeah, look. AJ McCarron was questionable up until an hour before the game started. The motherfucker didn't even travel with the team the day before.
Yeah.
How is it that and both of these teams they're all together on the same plane? You're telling me that no one cared to mention, hey, guess what? The starting quarterback, an MVP candidate, is not even traveling with the team. Nobody knew about that until an hour before lock. I don't understand it at all. Maybe are they intentionally, like, one thing I would think of was, okay, maybe they're intentionally trying to keep it on wraps just in case, because the other team, maybe they're game planning for McCarron. Bro, they're on the same fucking plane. You're telling me that they don't see, hey, where's AJ McCarron? He's probably the most popular person in this entire league. Oh, he didn't travel. No one gets on their phone and tweets it out. I don't get it. It's bullshit, and I think it goes to show why none of these Sharks are playing. And every single time you play XFL to finish the season, and probably with USFL, just expect to lose every dollar. Because of stupid shit like this, and it fucking pisses me off. All right, let's move on to the first look. So we're going to go game by game here, just kind of briefly talk about some of the motivations, talk about, the overall games and what we can expect from these games and how to build your lineups, maybe with late swap in mind, things like that. We'll jump into the breakdown where we'll go position by position. We'll talk a little bit about stacks and value. Then we'll get into our lineup builds, and then we'll send it out. So this first game here, the Vipers going into Houston. Houston is favored. They're minus 250, 6.5 point favorites. This is a 43.5 point total. Houston has a playoff spot in the South locked down. I mean, there is a chance that maybe the Renegades can win out. And, if Houston loses, maybe they're in trouble. But Houston will be in the playoffs for the South. The only question is, can they secure a home game? Looks like they probably can. But my point here is, look, Houston has everything to play for. There's not going to be any teams this week, in my opinion, that are just going to, sort of play the backups and play it safe for the playoffs. I don't think that happens this week. Maybe we see it next week. When it comes to this game, though, we got Brandon Silvers. Did not look too hot last week, to be honest. He really didn't look too good. I mean, he got the job done. They did win that game, but that elbow or that forearm or whatever that injury is on his arm, he was overthrowing players. He was underthrown. He wasn't very accurate. I hope this week that maybe he's been able to heal up enough, and we can actually see him complete some of these big passes, because at 8,700 for Brandon Silvers in this game, he's cheap. And he's going up against, guess who? Who are the two teams that we're always going to target? Offenses. Vipers and the Orlando Guardians. So I don't, the Vipers defense has gotten better the last few weeks. I mean, I commented on it 2 weeks ago. They shut down the run. Last week they did pretty decent. They didn't look bad up against St. Louis, but hey, they're also playing a backup quarterback, so we don't know what that actually means. In this situation, I expect Houston to come out and absolutely crush. They're one of the highest, tied with DC for implied total for points. So what do we do with Brandon Silvers here, man? He looked bad. Are people going to be scared away from him? And are you interested in any McClendon stacks?
I'll have a little bit of McClendon. He's getting to a price though that it's a little bit difficult to really love him. You're just deciding if I want to play H. McCarron or Ben DiNucci at that point. Do I want to pay up just a little more and get these guys with the for sure volume? But we know McClendon's got the rushing upside, so I think that he's somebody that we can include in the player pool. As far as targeting this game, I think I'm probably going to go the other side a little bit more. I'm hoping that Brandon Silvers isn't getting a lot of ownership because his price went down, right?
Yeah, down $200.
Yeah, man. Look, they got a 25 point total. That stacked your quarterback and your number one wide receivers the same amount as just about these other 25 point totals. And Lucky Jackson, Jordan Tamu, that's still a kind of a low projected stack. I would think Silvers and Burnett could get a lot more points out of that. So
yeah.
Again, just comparatively speaking, I really like targeting Roughnecks against the Vipers defense.
Absolutely. And like I said earlier, I do think that, Houston has been pretty good against the run this year, but I think they're vulnerable on defense at this point. And it looks like, these Vipers running backs, Rod Smith, John Lovett, these guys are kind of interesting. If you're trying to, get a run back going out there, I think maybe you can incorporate one of those guys or Badette if he does play. If Badette doesn't play, I think it's a toss-up. I mean, probably Geronimo Allison's the guy. Sinkyu Sweeney, he dropped a big play that basically could have won him the game last week. I don't know if he hasn't been getting as involved as he was a few weeks ago when he had that massive game. So if Badette's out, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know. Probably Geronimo Allison, but I probably just don't get too crazy with game stacks if that's the case. Orlando is out of it. They're going into San Antonio. Hey, guess what? Orlando's back to being underdogs again, apparently. San Antonio is 2-point favorites. This is a 39.5 point total, lowest on the slate. And the Brahmas are favored minus 125 favorites. So I don't know, man. Look, Cone is one of these guys that they've been trying to get rid of. It's like they brought in Ben Kirk. They brought in they're bringing in dudes. They started Sinet. He got hurt. They're trying to start dudes in place of Cone, but he seems to be the only guy available. They did bring in Paxton Lynch. So they signed him off the street after Orlando released him. And guess what? I mean, I think there's a chance that you could see Paxton Lynch playing in this game. Am I interested in playing Paxton Lynch? Probably not. If we get word that like Cone is inactive or some shit, and Lynch is active, and they use Jawan Pass as the backup, well, then maybe I will target some Lynch, but I'm not going to risk it enough. Just knowing that this could be a quarterback carousel in San Antonio, honestly. And look, Dormady last week, he got heavy ownership. We knew it was going to happen because he had an incredible record-breaking week prior to that. And, you know, he had 5 turnovers. He looked terrible. The team didn't look too hot, but guess what? He still had 21 plus fantasy points. Why? Because of his rushing ability. So I do think that Dormady is in play again. I don't know what his ownership is going to look like, but I think he's in play again. I think you're going to have to get some exposure to him. But look, to me, the Guardians are out of it. They're just playing for pride at this point, and they're trying to get, you know, they're trying to get some tape out there for these players. So it's not like they're benching all their starters. Maybe they give some other opportunities to guys who are, you know, fringe players who didn't get a lot to play a lot. I don't know. But this is probably the only game where the motivations are a little bit up in the air, but I don't see avoiding this game just because of that. I'm avoiding it because it's probably going to be a bad game. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you on this one. I think the easiest way to play this one, maybe you look at some defenses. Guardians, Brahmas, both defenses are probably in play here. And then just look at a couple one-offs. Maybe you take a Charleston Rainbow if that's what you have salary left over and you want a GPP pivot or something along those lines. But that's probably going to be where I go with this game. Nothing more than a one-off. I don't even think I'll get a 1-1 stack. And I don't even know if I'll get any Quentin Dormady, to be honest with you. I love D-Day, but I don't know. I don't know if this is the week.
I think you really have to take advantage of these low-priced wide receivers. I mean, obviously Eli Rogers went off finally for the first time this year. We've been waiting. He's been around 3K to 4K the entire season, and he's getting targets. He's not, you know, scoring touchdowns. He wasn't having these big games. He finally had a big game. And you know, there's guys like Dan Williams or some of these backup tight ends that we could talk about with Latimer out. We're probably going to want to get our value from the pass catchers in this game, because most likely Orlando is going to come out and they're going to throw the ball 30 plus times. Where's that going to? Probably 10 targets that are up in the air with Latimer out. They got to get spread around somewhere. All right, let's move on to Sunday. Arlington Renegades still in the playoff hopes. I mean, they're there right now. If they pretty much control their own destiny, which is going to be a terrible, you know, if we see Houston versus Arlington to go to the XFL championship, I mean, that's just these conferences are a little lopsided to the north. But anyways, Arlington has something to play for. DC has something to play for because look, they want to have that home game. If they win this game, maybe next week we see, you know, King or we see some other players because there's not going to be a whole lot to play for. But we don't know yet. We just got to see how this goes. Arlington is big, you know, they're big underdogs. They got Luis Perez now. This is a 41.5 point total, and the defenders are 8.5 point favorites. So what do we do here, man? Luis Perez, Sal Cannella got 0 targets. He got a big old 0 last week, which I know Scott Tradamus was not too happy about that. I don't know, man. Like, this game is kind of interesting, but with Arlington's defense, I mean, that's a strong point with this team. They're not going to completely shut teams down, but do we see the defenders rushing for 200 yards and throwing for 300 yards? I don't know if it's going to be that kind of a game. What do you think?
Yeah, man, I think that this could easily just be kind of a low total, just middling performance game. But I am interested in it. Like Luis Perez and stacking up with really whatever you want on the Arlington side is fine. It's going to be cheap as hell, and you know that they're going to try and throw the ball. They don't really have anything to lose at this point. Like, go out there and try and win a goddamn game. So, you know, let Luis Perez swing it or sling it around. I think DC is probably going to come in decently chalky as they usually are. People are going to be running Jordan Ta'amu. They're going to have Lucky Jackson, Abram Smith. So you might be able to get a pretty nice GPP pivot just stacking this game up, doing a 3-1 or a 2-1 with a run back, even 2-2. Who gives a shit? Go 3-2. I don't care.
Yeah.
But look, this might be the way to go. This might be a fun game to target for GPPs. But I'll be all over one-offs. I think you can run the DC side as well. Tamu, Lucky Jackson, different stacks. Probably do Tamu and Abram Smith if you want to run just the running game, and then handcuff it with the defense. That could be a great way to tackle the low total.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, one thing I'll say about the defenders, we know they're going to give up yards in the air. So if Luis Perez, after one start under his belt, comes out and they can game plan a little bit better with him practicing with the team, maybe they come out and I'm not going to play any of these Arlington wide receivers as one offs. I'll only play them along with a stack. If I do choose to go some Perez. But some of these guys, you got to talk about, like Tyler Vaughn, Brendan Arconato. Like, I'm not super interested in them. They're not sexy plays, but this is this is a little bit of a different team with Perez at the helm. They're going to throw the ball more probably. We got to talk about, obviously guys like Devion Smith and Letty Brown are good options in this game as one-offs. And obviously you have the defenders, Chris Blair. I probably could have put Chris Blair there instead of Lucky Jackson, but Lucky Jackson seems to be kind of consistently getting the targets. But Chris Blair has big upside. He's going to get a lot of ownership this week. Let's go to the last game. This game's pretty damn important. I think this is a game you really target. Everybody's going to target, pretty much. And I don't think that's the wrong thing to happen. A lot of times we'll see these games like, that game in the first half last week with Seattle and DC. It was a low scoring game, and I thought, okay, cool, I got a shot still. And then it absolutely went shit nuts after halftime. This could be a similar situation here. The Battlehawks are actually favored in this game, -120. They're at home. It's a 46-point total. So this is the highest total on the slate, and the Battlehawks are 1.5 point favorites. So look, if McCarron plays, which I think he will, if he doesn't play, then he must be really hurt. And will he even be available for the playoffs if he can't play in a game like this? Who knows? But you're going to have to stack get a lot of your quarterback exposure, get a lot of your pass catchers and running back exposure from this game. Look, man, what do we do here? You're probably going to want to do, a quarterback +2 and then a run back at minimum for this game if you're doing stacks, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're using optimizers, a really easy way to make sure that you're covered here is having a minimum of one player from each team in this game. Then at the very least, you're getting a 1-1 stack, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you got to target a 3-1, probably even a 3-2, and then get pieces from these other games. But yeah, we have a lot of salary implications on this one. The stacking prices are going to be a lot higher, so we're going to have to find decent value. Or maybe the way to get unique is you take Silvers and Burnett, and then that's it. You stack up the rest. Maybe you don't take a quarterback from that game,
Yeah.
and you just throw in all the peripheral pieces from the last game and get all the points that way. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens when we build, but this should be the cornerstone of, of all your lineups here, probably.
Look, here's the thing too is let me pull this up before we move on. This is what Agent McCarron looks like in the app right now. He's listed as out. So I don't see that changing before lock. I mean, this is the Sunday. This is the last game on Sunday. This could be like this. You could have an out next to his name in the first half of this game still. So my only point in bringing this up is I think people are going to be aware. Like at this point, there's probably not a lot of casuals playing XFL in Week 9, but his ownership could come down a little bit just having that out next to him. We saw the same thing happen to Brandon Silvers last week. So just worth mentioning that it could be worth, hey, at minimum, I think you've got to have a lot of exposure to this game just for late swap purposes alone, just in case Agent McCarron is out. And at that point, if you have a ton of McCarron, maybe you can just jump right up to DiNucci if you're screwed. If McCarron is out, that would be the only probably, or just leave a ton of money on the table. That's your other option. All right, let's get into this breakdown. Let's do it. Break it down. All right, so we're starting with quarterbacks here. Ben DiNucci, he's 12.2K. He's gotten more expensive every week throughout this year. He's never dropped in salary. By this point, if they make it to the Super Bowl, he's going to be like 14K. He's 12.2K. Agent McCarron is 11.7, which is what he was last week. Quentin Dormady, D-Day Dormady is 10.6. Jordan Ta'amu is 10.1. And then you got McClendon at 94 and Brandon Silvers at 87. To me, looking at this, like Brandon Silvers at 8,700, I know it's a big question mark, but going up against Vegas, that difference in salary, how often is Brandon Silvers going to get absolutely outscored by one of these dudes like Dormady? I don't know. I feel like the salary savings you get is going to allow you to really really pick up some of these higher owned, high priced dudes in that last game. What are your thoughts here, man? Where are you leaning this week? Everybody's going to go DiNucci and McCarron, and then it's going to be, probably 30 or 40% exposure to go around, maybe less. What are your thoughts?
First thing I need to address is I got Dormady and McClendon pricing backwards. For whatever reason, I saw McClendon at 10.6. So now that I'm no longer dyslexic, and obviously Dormady is the guy that I'm going to continue to not have much of. I don't mind getting McClendon at 9,400. That's fine. He's going to be a decently priced stack. But I'm with you. I think Brandon Silvers is probably the staple. Beyond that, I think obviously we just talked about getting exposure to Ben DiNucci and AJ McCarron so that we have exposure to that very last game. But I think Brandon Silvers and even a little bit of Jalen McClendon and then Luis Perez, those will probably be the guys that I'm going to be building mostly around, just because of what you said. That those pricing that price just gives you so much more flexibility. And McClendon's got rushing upside too,
Yeah.
so I
Yep.
would expect him to be at least closer to Tomu. You know what I mean? But I think that those are the guys that you play. You play the guys in the 8,000s, and then pray a little bit for the guys at the top. Now, we do need to talk about how you're going to stack if you decide to put AJ McCarron. Like, we're expecting him to play. I don't think that they're going to sit him. But if you have him in your stacks, you need to be able to switch to Ben DiNucci. So he's $500 more.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
make sure that you have a forced at least two players, right? That you have to have a minimum stack so that you can flex out wherever you need to go up to McCarron and then, or go up to DiNucci from McCarron and still be able to have the flexibility to get a decently stacked wide receiver with Ben.
Yeah.
So we'll see that more in the lineup build. But yeah, man, 8,000 is probably my range for quarterback.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
McClendon.
And look, one way to get different is to do a little stack with like McClendon, and maybe you go McClendon and Badette, and then the rest of your players are from from that last game, or you mix you mix I don't know, a running back from one of these good defenses. You go Jacquez Patrick with the defense, and then you just jam in this last game. It's going to be interesting because I think at this point, yeah, there's always a chance that game's a little underwhelming, and you can get a lot of leverage by not being heavy in that game. But I think we know at this point how these games are usually going to go. And this feels like a game that can easily put up 50 points. All right, let's get on to running backs. So Abram Smith, most expensive again. He's 10.6K. Brian Hills is 10.4. Borgie is 86. Devion Smith 84, and Jacquez Patrick 77. So look, when it comes to Brian Hill in this game, look, Brian Hill. There's one thing that you could be sure of with Brian Hill. He's going to get injured twice, and he's going to fumble twice. So that's a lot of grenades that can go off and really just mess your day up. Every time the dude runs the ball, I think, okay, that's it. He's out for the rest of the game. He's always 40% owned. This is the one guy that you could get risky with and fade. It's risky, but he's one of these guys that he could fumble 3 times in a row and just be sitting on the bench, or he could pull his hamstring again, or he can hurt his back. This guy gets pulled out. I feel like every single time there's always some issue with Brian Hill in these games, and he manages to just figure out a way to still get it done. But one thing to talk about is we saw on the injury report, we saw Mateo Durant is questionable with that concussion. Kareem Walker at 3K. That could be worth the pivot off of Brian Hill in like 1 or 2 lineups. I'm not talking about a huge thing, but especially if you're doing like showdown, maybe you fade Brian Hill in a couple lineups and you go with more Kareem Walker at min price. So anyways, man, we have our usual suspects up here. Jacquez Patrick has a good matchup. Devion Smith, it gets involved a lot. I don't know if I love the matchup against DC. What do we do with this top end running backs? And are you interested in more Philip Lindsay now that we kind of know that he's the guy?
So I think I can answer the Philip Lindsay here by answering the other piece. So with the top end running backs, man, they're just getting to a price that it's a really bit difficult to get to them. 10-6, Abram Smith needs a touchdown. He needs 80 plus yards, 4 or 5 receptions. Like, he has to get you 10 to 15 fantasy points. More like 15 to 20. Brian Hill, same thing. I think Max Borgi is fine right now that he's down at 8,600. People are starting to sleep on him, but he still gets such heavy involvement in the pass game. All he needs to do is break one screen out, and he's going to pay off an 8,600 tag. So I don't mind getting a little bit more Borgie, but other than the top guys, I think you just got to sit in this middle, right? Pay the price for 7,500 Lindsey. I don't mind 7,700 Patrick, but go down to guys like Lovett, take a flyer on Rod Smith, go back to Dimebag Darrell. Like this is kind of the area I think you need to sit in, man. We're going to be paying up for wide receivers. We're going to be trying to stack up that Seattle St. Louis game. I'm not trying to pay up for Brian Hill or whatever these guys are.
Yeah, I mean, Darrington broke my heart last week along with Cedric Bird. Both got 2.4 fantasy points, I believe, and I had them in pretty much most of my lineups. I'm not giving up on Dimebag. It was just not a good, game script for him. He only got like 5 carries, and it was just bad. This is probably the week that he's going to be a little bit lower owned, and you never know with him. He's kind of boom or bust, to be honest. In this lower range here, you've got Letty Brown at 4,500. Raquel Armstead finally got into the end zone last week with a reception touchdown, 4,400. Like I said, with Durant, he's probably out. You could look at Kareem Walker at bare minimum, but that's a little risky. You got Hilliman at 3,100. You have Brian Burt. I mean, it all depends on Lovett's status. I mean, these are, and then look, Puka Williams, we finally got to see him for DC. He's 3K. Look, all these guys are just complete dart throws. Like, who knows if they're even worth it? Like, even a guy like TJ Hammonds last week, I ended up switching out of him a lot and more to Hilliman. But all these guys I think are in play, but maybe just sprinkle them in. If you're doing, if you got, 60, 80 lineups, there's not a lot of contest selection out there this week, so maybe you're not running that many lineups. Maybe just like 1 or 2, of these guys in your lineups. Probably stick with mid-range and definitely get your exposure to these studs. All right, wide receivers. So Ja'Cour Pearson, 11.1K. Hakeem Butler, 11K. Jeff Badet, if he plays, he's 10.2K. Deontay Burnett, 97, et cetera, et cetera. So these top-end dudes, let's talk about them. Pearson was not doing too hot last week up until that touchdown towards the end of the game. Hakeem Butler is always going to give you an opportunity to score a touchdown. Where do we go with these guys on the top end?
I mean, these are probably going to be the 2 chalkiest wide receivers on the slate, right? Again, where it's going to be the heaviest owned game, the most popular game by far. So I think it makes for a really interesting pivot here. Obviously, get as much exposure to Ja'Cour Pearson and Keem Butler as you want. But again, I don't mind dropping down, getting Josh Gordon or Blake Jackson again this week. Darius Shepard at 9,200. Right, Darius Shepard didn't look great last week, but that's because he didn't have a starting quarterback. AJ McCarron loves Darius Shepard, so hopefully the ownership will come down on him a little bit. So again, like we're going to be stacking the hell out of this game. So just don't put all your eggs into one basket. If there's one thing that we're learning here in XFL is we don't know what the fuck is going on, right? So have some exposure to some of these other guys because they're going to get involved. So grab Pearson, Danucci, and then Blake Jackson, sack it up, however, whatever. But don't put all your eggs into one guy. I think you rotate in a couple of different pieces here. But I think again, you just you're probably gonna have to min one wide receiver from this game. I'll probably have 2 though. Pearson, whoever.
You probably
Seattle,
want
St.
to.
Louis 1-1.
Yeah, you probably want to at least players, whether that's Brian Hill or whatever, or Lindsey. You're gonna want 2 at minimum, in my opinion. Darius Shepard, yeah, you're right. I mean, this was last week was kind of the week where I was a little bit under on him, just simply with Tianu and everything. I just didn't know where to go, so I was a little under on Shepard. It ended up working out, but if AJ's back, we know that Shepard's one of the top wide receivers in the league. Blake Jackson is there, obviously. He's at 9K. Lucky Jackson. I mean, there's so many dudes. I mean, even a guy like Landon Akers at this point, we know he's probably going to get involved. Charleston Rambo, Travell Harris. I'm not too happy with my boy Cedric Bird here. I don't think I'm getting much of him this week because of Bandy's. Bandy's pretty much taking over that role at this point. Hammond, look, Juwan Green, he's going to be chalky. He's going to be chalky again. I think I maybe play him in my $222 lineup there. Sort of embrace some of that ownership. But for tournaments, maybe you can go with somebody else on this team. There's so many options that Ben DiNucci can pass to on this team. It's worth it. Eli Rogers at 5,300. That's by far his highest price, and he's probably going to be a little bit higher owned. But look, any one of these Orlando dudes could go off. Dan Williams is one of these guys that could go off. And look, nobody's talking about KD Cannon. I mean, dude, he had I lost track of how many deep targets he had last week. Like he had at least 2, maybe 3 deep touchdown worthy plays. He's at 3K. Nobody's playing him because they're going to be focused on, they're going to be focused on dudes who went off last week from Orlando. I think you got to get, some guys from Orlando involved. So anyways, as we wrap up the wide receivers here, anybody that I missed, look, we got to talk about Marcel Aitman, man. Again, he's at 4,300. He had an opportunity at last week. I think it was 4K or 4,100. He had an opportunity at the end of that game to score a touchdown there. He had 10 fantasy points, and if he scores that touchdown there, it's a slate breaker almost at that price tag. I'm going with him again, especially with A.J. McCarron back. The previous week that A.J. McCarron played with Aitman, he had like 3 straight targets in the end zone in that game. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for Aitman. I think you could fade Butler and play Aitman instead, and just hope that maybe he's the guy that gets that 1 or 2 touchdown opportunities. Thoughts there?
Absolutely, man. Look, I think you can max 2 of the wide receivers if you're going to do that. Have Aitman Butler or Aitman Darius Shepard. But yeah, I'm right there with you. They're getting their quarterback back, and they're getting their best wide receiver back, or one of their wide receivers back. So I love him at 4,300. Another guy that I'm interested in, Brandon Arconato. He's back down to 4,200. He's got 34 targets on the year. You got Matthew Sexton, Vegas Vipers. We saw him get a little bit more comfortable with McClendon over the past couple of weeks. He's 3,900. He's a guy I'm gonna have a little bit of exposure to. TJ Vasher still not priced. Now I know they don't have a quarterback, but I'll still have him in my player pool. The wide receivers, we just have a little bit more flexibility down in this price range. But again, I think Aitman is probably the guy that you start with and then kind of fill in with these other pieces.
All right, so tight ends here. Sal Cannella is probably one of your better options. Better in quotation marks here. He's 6,600. Then you have some other dudes. You got Alize Mack, Ethan Wolf. Alex Ellis has 2 touchdowns on the year for DC. I think you can look at some of these DC tight ends, and Sean Price as well. I don't know how. Obviously we could talk about these Orlando dudes with Latimer out. Jalen Smith, Logan Carter, Jordan Thomas. I think all those dudes are kind of in play. I think for Orlando, I'm leaning more towards a lot of that open role that Latimer's leaving is probably going to fall to more of these wide receivers than these bigger tight end dudes. But you got to kind of be interested in somewhat in these tight ends, right?
Yeah, I mean, they'll be in my player pool. I'm not going to have a whole bunch of them, but just kind of those starting guys, right? Sal Cannella, even B. Riley Moore, right? We saw him get targets in the end zone. Alize Mack, and then, Alex Ellis, the guy with the touchdown. So these are guys that are going to get some run. I don't know if you necessarily need them for main, but they'll be in the player pool.
All right, let's go to defense. Ellie, talk to me about some of these defenses here. I gotta walk outside real quick. Just talk about these defenses for me.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll start right off top at Houston, 4,900. I'm not sure that they're priced correctly going up against Las Vegas, who again seems to find some rhythm with McClendon in a quarterback. But uh, take that with a grain of salt. I'm not generally paying up for defense, anyways. I think really kind of the place you want to sit here is maybe the Brahmas at 4K or 4,100 versus Orlando. That's interesting. I don't know if we necessarily need any Sea Dragons or Battle Hawks. That's going to be a very high scoring game. But Orlando Guardians even at 3,800 versus San Antonio. That's interesting. And then I think you can take a stabs on the Vegas Vipers here. 3,500 against Houston. Maybe take the risk. If Brandon Silver sucks dick again, this could easily be the time for the Vipers to come out and what did Vipers do? Attack, fucking bite you? I don't know. So look, man, I think you kind of avoid the high price guys. Probably Brahmas, Vipers, or the chalkier builds this week. Maybe even DC Defenders. If you're gonna pay up, I think that's probably the pay up. DC Defenders.
Yeah, I agree with you. One thing I will say about the defenders, Luis Perez, they do give up some pass yards, but the defenders are one of these teams that if you're going to count on like a defensive touchdown or something like that, it's probably going to come from like the defenders most likely. So keep an eye on that. And also look, St. Louis, that's going to be a high scoring game, but hey, Ben DiNucci, we know for a fact he's going to throw an interception. We know, and he's going to probably have a fumble or two. So we got to kind of figure out, hey, is St. Louis worth it? If they can get a touchdown on defense or special teams, is it worth it? All right, let's move on to our stacks. So Ellie, where are you going this week? If you're playing like smaller, like higher buy-in, smaller overall, like we're gonna call them sort of cash or single entries, where are you going with your stacks this week? If you were to play that 222, where do you think you're gonna go? And then what about your $15 big contest stacks?
I think I might start with AJ McCarron just because it gives you the flexibility to build off of the news. It's the last game. If you start to feel antsy as you get closer, you can kind of just rebuild throughout the weekend. So that would probably be where I start stacking up that first game. But just based on pricing, I don't hate getting a little bit of Jalen McClendon for cash. I think stacking up that Viking or that Vipers Houston game could be an interesting way, and then taking all the studs from the Viper or the Ben DiNucci game. Jesus, man.
Yeah, I think AJ McCarron probably is the way to go for that 222. I don't know. And at worst, you just switch out of them and just go to DiNucci. But I honestly, I'm leaning towards Silvers. I really am. Like, put Silvers and Bandy together or something like that. Get some salary savings, get some of that first game with another offense that's been underachieving but can go off, going up against a bad defense, and then just get the rest of a lot from that last game. When it comes to value, who do you think your favorite sort of? We could even say middle range value. There's just not a lot of like slam dunk value recently with the XFL, unless news comes out. I don't know. What are you thinking about some value here this week?
Don't get mad at me, but I am going to steal your 8-man guy. But we talked about it a little bit. You really got to start there. He should be kind of the chalk value, and then you can kind of go in and find stuff that you're comfortable with. And we mentioned a couple names a second ago. Fred Brown, Letty Brown, some of the Browns. What can Brown do for you? And then the other thing is probably running back, staying probably in the mid tier unless you just think Brian Hill or Abram Smith has 1 or 2 touchdowns. Otherwise, I think that's kind of the way to build the slate value running back.
Yeah, it could be stupid, this week not playing Brian Hill. Maybe I play him in the 222 and then I fade him or at least go a little bit under the field in some of my other tournament lineups. But I think Jacquez Patrick and Philip Lindsay in that area, I know that's not really value. But when below that, maybe Letty Brown, Reichwell Armstead potentially, depending on how healthy he is. It's just kind of tough. And like I said, keep an eye out on that concussion news because Kareem Walker could be the backup at bare min. And we all know that, Brian Hill has a tendency to get hurt or miss a couple drives here and there. All right, let's build our lineup here. We're going to go through this pretty quick. If you guys want to see some more builds from us and just kind of like for educational purposes, just kind of looking at how we can go about, figuring out some of these builds, just join the Discord. You can scan that down below, or you can click down in the description and hit join. It's free. And we'll obviously be in there all morning tomorrow, depending on injuries, and we'll be in there throughout the whole weekend, adapting as each game happens and each inactives come out. So Ellie, let's build like our chalky lineup that we feel is kind of a safer build that you'd want to put into one of these bigger contests, like these 222s or whatever. You probably, are you going AJ McCarron for this to start? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So who are we stacking along with him? Do we want to we probably want to go 8-man because of the value that you can get, right? And Hakeem Butler or Shepard or Hill and 8-man, like probably 8-man at least is one of these guys.
Let's go. I think I would prefer Shepard and 8-man.
Okay. Yeah, I agree.
Personally.
Yeah. With AJ McCarron back, that is definitely a good option. Where is he at? Where's our boy? All right. Now you don't have to do a two stack with the quarterback here if you're trying to spread things out a little bit, but I think, in my opinion, it's pretty safe with how much offense is going to go down in this game. So who are we running this back with? Do you want to run it back with like a Philip Lindsay type? Do you want to embrace the chalk with Juwan Green, or do we want to just say screw it, man? Pearson's the guy. Let's pay up and get him. I don't know that we can do that. But where are we going?
I actually let's. You want to go Blake Jackson? Can we
Yeah,
build a Blake?
I do. I do. And you can always Blake Jackson. You could always go down to if any news comes out, you can go down to Juwan Green and then pay up somewhere else. You know what I mean? Go up from Shepard to Hakeem Butler or something like that. But this is a decent little game stack here. Like I like for tournaments, I might do one more dude. Like I might just go crazy in a lot of these. But if I'm trying to play it safe, I think that this is the edge of where we'd want to go. I might even just go 3 total players from this game. But in this case, where are we going here? We got a decent amount of salary left. Do you want to pick the defense here first and see where everything else fits in, or like maybe just do we want to go like Orlando just to start out?
Yeah, well, let's do San Antonio since they're a little more expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, I gotcha. All right, so look, we could punt sort of and get some value here, some relatively owned value in this last spot, either at running back or at flex. We do want to have our fill up our flex positions with this last game. Don't like stick Brian Hill in the running back. I mean, I guess you can, but like if you're playing 2 running backs, just make sure you put that last game in the flex. Where are we going here? You want to pick our running back first? Like, do you think this is a Jacquez Patrick situation here?
Let's do it just to see what we can do in the flex spot.
All right.
4K.
So that gets us 4K. I think there's some decent options here. Like, I think you can go Bandy, potentially. You can go Dan Williams. Let me save that. You can go Dan Williams, Sexton. I don't know that I'm interested in that. He popped up on the injury report. Bandy is probably the guy I would go with here.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I'm with you. You got Bandy, Fred Brown. I like Sexton for GPPs, but not for cash.
Yeah.
But for a safe build, I think Bandy's the way to go.
I think the value. Yeah, I think the value with Blake Jackson and Shepard is there with those price tags. You got some low end value with Aitman and Bandy, and then pretty much everybody else is a solid play. Like the really the only guys that you can question about whether or not they can really pay off is Aitman, because we still don't quite know how good he is. But at that price tag, it's worth it. And then Bandy, you never know with a guy that cheap. You just never know how it runs. But he's 3,600. If he gets you 11 fantasy points, I think that's really the number you should be aiming for these lower end guys, like 10 fantasy points on the low end, just to kind of min cash. All right, do you want to do a Brandon Silvers build here?
Yeah.
All right. So Brandon Silvers at 8,700. Who do we want to pair him with? Let's consider this a lineup in the big contest. So where do we want to go? Do we want to do a run back here? Do we want to just stack Silvers on one dude, and then get that last game? Like, where do you want to go?
Hear me out. All right, so let's go Bandy, Burnett, and then let's run it back with Bidet.
Nice, I like it. Bandy, Burnett, Bidet. Decent amount of salary left. It's not bad. That Bandy play is nice. Let's get you want to get our defense and our running back here before we fill in that last spot?
Yeah. I mean, you want to
just go DC?
Say that again?
You want to just go DC and see if we can fit a decent lineup in here?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah, DC. I mean, can you do that?
No, I don't think so.
2,500, dude. All those tight ends. All those tight ends, bro.
Every single one of them.
Yeah. I mean, 2,500, you can do anybody. Like, Ethan Wolf, Jordan Thomas, all these tight ends that might get some extra play time with Cody Latimer out. You can mess around with that. Or you could go down to like Devion Smith or somebody else here in this last spot and pay up, in the 4K range probably. But that's kind of what you're looking at. You probably going to want to get Bandy involved just as one-offs and in stacks. I think he's probably a pretty safe play. 9 targets last week. Do you want to build one more lineup here?
Sure.
Who do you want to play at quarterback?
Let's go McClendon. Let's just go the other way.
All right, let's try it. McClendon. Do you want to put him in like Rod Smith or John Lovett together?
Let's do John Lovett.
Okay.
And let's do Bidet Burnett and Bandy.
Hey, you're going all in on this game. I like it. Bidet, if he plays, Burnett and Bandy. This is a little much. Like, it's probably one of these lineups that you really got to have this game absolutely, hit 50 points. But hey, that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get some decent ownership savings here. 5,600. Let's pick a game that's completely obviously separate than this. Where do you want to go? We can probably pay up for defenders at this point.
Let's actually put in Lucky Jackson and then see where we're at. See if we can. That should give us defenders, I think.
Yeah, we're not really doing a good job here getting exposure for that last game. This is like you're basically fading. This is what you would do if you're fading that game, basically. 2,900, we can't get them.
It's not enough.
Yeah, so we can get. Who can we get in this spot here? Probably like a Jacquez Patrick or Philip Lindsay, even probably, or just go all the way down to Juwan Green or one of these guys like that. But I don't know that you need to. What do you got? 3,800. So Guardians defense. I mean, these are kind of interesting builds. I personally want to have two guys, like a 1+1 or a 2-0 or something from that last game. If you focus on that, if you make rules that you have at least like one player from each team or at least two players from that game in there, I think it really at least allows you to be able to swap and move things around with some of your other stacks. If any news comes out or if some of these other games are complete duds, maybe you start just putting all the studs in or you start putting low-owned guys from the last game if your lineups are dead. All right, Ellie. What are we thinking here, man? We're on week 9. There's just not a lot of, in my opinion, like we talked about, late swapping stuff last week. Like, I don't really know where the edge is at this point. Like, most of the information is out there. Like, you either have it or you don't. And we kind of know which teams are good, which teams are bad. I think balanced lineups and just focusing on the studs and maybe getting one or two of these randos that might go off could be your strategy. What are you going to be doing this weekend?
Sticking by the motto, don't get married to any one player. And even though the lineup build that I just had was a little bit crazy, right? Don't be afraid to do some stuff like that, right? We have just said that we're gonna have a minimum of 2 players from that game. It's possible that the rest of the field will. So as we get closer to lock, maybe the edge is by not doing that, by capping it as far as a game stack goes. So obviously that's ballsy to do on what's obviously the highest total of the slate, but just keep that kind of stuff in mind. Don't get married to any one thing. We don't know what's going to happen. The XFL is crazy as shit.
Yeah. Let us know in the comments, guys, if you were going to be playing USFL. Like I said, we're probably going to hold off on doing any content from that, from USFL until at least the XFL season is done. Let us know what you're doing down there. Join that Discord, and if you don't have Discord, all good. Just comment down below, kind of what your thoughts on these games are. Who's some of your favorite stacks, and who's some of your favorite value. We will see you next week for Week 10. See you guys later.